going in at the entrance there. Let's come back a little ways. Okay. So anyway, yeah, it looks like John is getting increasingly frustrated with my protest. And it's really unfortunate that the SPVM interfered so many times in the past, because if they had not interfered, if they had simply allowed me to engage in peaceful public protest without undue interference, I suspect that this protest would have wound up successfully years ago. But because the SPVM repeatedly replied to dubious complaints from church leadership, even going so far as to bring false criminal charges against me, and having me arrested and charged with the criminal act of disrupting the order and solemnity of church services, even though I'm just protesting outside the church. I'm not making much noise, as a rule. Hey, Harvey. So here I am. I'm outside the church. Got some picket signs, walking back and forth, not saying much. Now, the sanctuary is here. This is where services are held in the Unitarian Church of Montreal. And as you can see, it's brick and stone. And it's a bit fortress-like, and there's really only a few slit windows besides this tall, stained glass thingy. And even some of these slit windows are blocked, like for instance this one here, the one furthest to the what we call east in Montreal, is completely blocked. You cannot see out it at all. And then we got these other ones. Well, the two up there are so high above ground level that you cannot see me at all through them unless you're up on the ceiling or something. So I'm not visible through those two windows, which brings us down to this one. Now, theoretically speaking, if you're sitting in a chair in the Unitarian Church of Montreal during a service, the chairs are perpendicular. They're facing to what we call east. So you would have to look 90 degrees to your right to maybe, just maybe, catch a glimpse of my head going past the window as I pass. And then this window is pretty well obscured by stained glass. So what I'm saying here in a long-winded way is I cannot be seen from inside the church when a protest is going on. I cannot be heard from inside the church when a protest is going on. Even if I made quite a bit of noise, it's possible I might be faintly heard. I think it's reasonably well soundproofed. So no, basically I cannot be seen, I cannot be heard. I do not go into the church. I basically do not step onto church property. So how could I possibly be disturbing the order and solemnity of church services with my peaceful public protest outside the church? Now, this is essentially what I told the Crown Prosecutor after I was arrested, hoping to persuade him to do the intelligent thing and drop the charges, but no. He insisted that he had witnesses, that he wanted to proceed to trial, which I said fine by me. He actually did make an offer that if I signed a peace bond, i.e. a restraining order for a year, that they would drop the charges. Because I was quite certain I was innocent, I said, well, no, thank you. Really, if you do not drop the charges, we will go to trial and I'll defend myself. And that's exactly what I did. I defended myself without a lawyer because I felt that the charges were so flimsy that it was almost impossible to be found guilty. And I said, you know what, I'll defend myself. And if for some bizarre reason I actually am found guilty, well, then I will find a lawyer to have an appeal. But I wasn't found guilty. I wasn't even close to found guilty. I cross-examined the prosecution witnesses about whether or not I could be heard or seen inside the church during church services. And although one of them did try to say that I could be seen, that is Val Bourdon, when I asked him, can I be seen within the sanctuary during a church service, he said yes. And I said, how? He said, well, people are staring at you through the lobby windows. Well, what he means is that window there. And it's true that some people do, in fact, stare through that window and look out at my protest on occasion. But that's not where services are celebrated. So my next question to Mr. Valbourdon was, do you celebrate church services in the lobby? And his response was a long, drawn-out, dejected, no, kind of thing. So that answered that question. So, I proved to the court that I cannot be seen, I cannot be heard. Next question I asked is, has a church service ever actually been disrupted as a result of my protest? And both prosecution witnesses, specifically Jeremy Searle, NDG City Councillor, who I believe put pressure on the police to have me arrested, and Valbourdon, said yes. So I had to cross-examine them about how I disrupted services, not being seen, not being heard, how is a service being disrupted? Both of them went on and on about how terribly uncomfortable they felt inside knowing that I was out there protesting. In other words, they were talking about their personal emotions, their personal feelings, which I suppose might have some impact on their enjoyment of a Sunday service. But that is not a disruption of a Sunday service. That's a couple of, overly sensitive souls, shall we say, feeling uncomfortable because there's a protester outside their church. In no way disrupting the service. So I made that point. And I said, has a church service ever stopped and started again as a result of my protest? Has it actually been disrupted? Has there been clear disruption of the actual service itself? To which they both reluctantly admitted there had not been. So it's kind of funny how I was arrested for allegedly disrupting the order and solemnity of church services on the basis of accusations brought against me by Jeremy Searle, Valbourdon, other leading members of the Unitarian Church in Montreal, when in fact, according to their own testimony, when I asked them about it in court, no church service had actually been disrupted. And again, the point that I'm trying to make here is that if the SPVM had just stayed out of it, if they had not had me arrested on those criminal charges, which were incredibly bogus, the church might have thought, well, maybe we should, try to settle this with Robin. But once I was arrested, they had no incentive to negotiate a settlement of the grievances that I was protesting about. They were, much preferred to, let's see what happens in court, because if we win, Robin may end up in jail, or at minimum we'll get some kind of restraining order against the guy, and he won't be able to protest anymore. That was the whole purpose for bringing those charges against me. The primary purpose, was not so much to have me in jail for a couple of years, which is, a possible outcome, because the maximum penalty for the criminal act of disrupting a church services is 2 years in jail. So theoretically, I could have been sentenced to a 2-year jail term. But in, more pragmatic terms, I think what the Unitarian Church of Montreal was seeking was a restraining order, ideally a permanent one in their minds, preventing me from protesting outside the church. That's essentially what they wanted and what they didn't get. And that brings us back to the false blasphemous libel charges that the Unitarian Universalist Association, I shouldn't say charges because I haven't been charged, the false blasphemous libel accusations that the Unitarian Universalist Association made against me. It's pretty much the same thing. They want my blog posts about Reverend Mac W. Mitchell, who was convicted of raping teenage Tibetan refugees, to disappear from the Emerson Avenger blog. They want my blog post about Richard Buell, parishioner of Reverend Dr. Victoria Weinstein, who was convicted of raping preteen girls, including a female family member. They want these blog posts to disappear from the Emerson Avenger blog, even though they're totally truthful and based on newspaper reports that I presume are reliable. You know, here's John Inder pretending that I'm just making unsubstantiated allegations, so on and so forth. No, sorry, John. You know, my blog posts are based on information that I have very reasonable grounds to believe is truthful. Nothing false about it. I mean, the Mac Mitchell case, you know, insofar as some cases of Unitarian Universalist clergy sexual misconduct are known publicly, is perhaps the most well-known one in terms of the public domain. There's even been mention of it on the Oprah show at one point some years ago. So as far as egregious clergy sexual misconduct on the part of Unitarian Universalist ministers goes, the Reverend Mac W. Mitchell case is well known. So why is it that the Unitarian Universalist Association thinks it's such a good idea to hire Stikeman Elliott Barristers and Solicitors litigation lawyer, Maitre Marc-André Coulombe, to falsely accuse me of making unfounded and vicious allegations to the effect that ministers of the association engage in such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape, when that case and every other case that I spoke about, blogged about, are publicly known and the people were actually convicted of such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape. What is that all about? You know, and you know, here John, he's trying so hard to pretend that I'm not telling the truth when no, actually I'm very truthful. You know, especially when you're dealing with such delicate subject matters, it's best to have the facts on your side, and I do. And the fact, you know, the reason that I have not been charged with blasphemous libel, to say nothing of the other ludicrous accusations that were brought against me by the UUA, is because I'm innocent. I'm not even close to committing blasphemous libel against the Unitarian Universalist religious community. And that's the